are here today on the Executive Conversations podcast, where I talk to marketing leaders about how they actually get stakeholder buy-in to drive their ideas to the end of the line. I do always forget to say this at the beginning of the podcast recording, so I will say it today. If you are enjoying this episode, please do subscribe to the channel and share it with another marketer that maybe is struggling to get buy-in or trying to figure out how other marketing leaders present their ideas to either executives or board or even their peers or even their own direct reports. We need to get buy-in from everybody. It is a huge challenge. Marketing isn't only about knowing how to market. So today I'm really excited about my guest. I have Shana Haynie, who is head of content and organic growth at MoEngage North America. And MoEngage is a customer engagement platform SaaS tool. Thanks, Shana, for joining me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Maeva, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I am very excited to have you on. I have only had a couple of heads of content on, and this is really my wheelhouse. And where I work with my clients is content. And so I'm really excited to hear your perspective about doing this kind of work. So I would love it actually if you could kind of walk me through your personal experience of learning this skill, or like when you had to face kind of getting this buy-in, because I know initially you probably learned, how do I create great content, and how do I do things that are surrounded to content? And then I'm sure there was one or several moments or a point in your career where you had to convince somebody of that. So tell me your story.
Yeah. So I think my career has been interesting just in the fact that I didn't always start in content exactly. So I started with more of the agency side, just like you, doing social media. So there's a kind of thing you have to get client buy-in to, which is something that I had to learn how to navigate first, for your ideas as the experts when they're the ones, shelling out the money for the programs that you want to do. So after social media marketing, I kind of moved into more of an inbound specific role. So the kind of full funnel of marketing. And so when you kind of are addressing like all of the different areas, like not just one specific, skill set like content, you kind of have to come up with programs that you think are going to work in order to, execute your strategy. And so one of the areas that you have to kind of do is figure out how you're going to convince other people that based on all of the wealth of knowledge that you have around a certain thing, that you're going to be able to put something together that's going to help you reach your goals. And sometimes, they're not going to be subject matter experts who understand exactly what you're talking about. And so I think.
So in your career, before when you started your career, you had to learn how to do good content marketing. How are we going to create great content, distribute it, etc.? At what point in your career did you face this moment where you realized, I actually have to learn how to get buy-in from other people, whether it's my clients because you were agency side, or from your boss or your peers? And could you tell me your story there?
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting because when you're first starting out in your career, like you said, you're trying to figure out what the best practices are, and you're trying to be really good at executing on those tactics essentially so that you can bring the best content to the front. But then as you start kind of getting more and more in depth into it and more responsibility becomes part of your role as a strategist, you have to start thinking about more than just the actual production side of things. You have to think about how is the content going to actually impact our business results. And as a practitioner, you kind of are able to see a lot into the data and the things that you have at your disposal, a little bit more than somebody who is at a higher level, like your boss, for instance. So they're not going to have as much in the weeds knowledge about the things that you're working on or the things that you recommend that you might need to do in order to improve those results. And so it becomes more important as you get further and further in your career to be able to say, hey, looking at this strategy as a high level, here are the things that I think we're going to need to do in order to reach the goals that you have laid out or that your organization has laid out for you. And so this becomes more and more complicated, especially the, more stakeholders you have involved in a certain project. And so it's something that you end up navigating or having to navigate as you become further and further in your career. And I think this isn't an exact like content example, but when I was working at Hearst Bay Area, which is it's a media company, so most people know Hearst, but just for those who don't, we ran the San Francisco Chronicle and SF Gate, and I ran our inbound marketing program there. And we were seeing actually really great results from a lot of our SEO and a lot of the content we were producing. And so my manager's manager asked me to come up with a strategy for how we're going to continue the flywheel, how we're going to keep, creating things that are going to drive the ROI that we had been seeing. And so, of course, this became this idea that, okay, we want more and more from this. We're going to need to invest more and more in different things, and based on what's working and what's not. And so I had to come up with this entire plan, which included building out a team underneath myself, which is usually the first step when you move from IC, into more of a manager level. And so coming up with the team structure that we needed and the things that we were going to need to invest in order to get the results that they wanted. And so that was kind of the first step, I feel like, in my career that I had to move, and actually get buy-in for a strategy that I had.
Did they say, give me this pitch and here are the things I need to see? Or was it your idea and you like wanted to push this forward?
In that particular instance, it was kind of like, hey, we're seeing good results from this inbound marketing program. Let's, what else can we do? What is your thought process behind how we're going to scale this? And so it was kind of like, yes, create this pitch, create this strategy, tell me how much it's going to cost, tell me how much you think it's going to generate for us. What are the potential like problems that we might face or challenges we might need to overcome? And like, why do you think that this is the right way to do it?
Were you quite savvy at the time about like salaries, how to calculate potential impact and reading that data?
Yeah. So I think because I had the agency background, so I did used to run my own business, I had a little bit more information about how to kind of navigate that side of things. It's funny because in that role, I felt a little bit like I had a lot more autonomy than I currently do, or in the roles that I've had since then. So I do think that it depends on like how much autonomy your organization is going to
Yeah.
give you, and how much trust they actually have in your programs and your area of expertise.
Do you think it was it just the company culture or you had built a different level of trust?
So I had a really great manager when I worked there. So she was very good at just kind of being like, okay, I trust that you know what you're doing. You run the strategy, you run your own budget. And so it was also a really small team within a pretty large organization. So it was kind of like not like a startup, but our marketing team was probably like 7 people for
Mm,
the San Francisco office. And I was the only one doing B2B. So everybody else was supporting
okay.
on the consumer side. So I felt like I had a lot of control over the programs and things that I wanted to work on.
Okay, cool. So in your new role, what's it like for you to have to push an idea?
Yeah.
Or in your
So
current role, I mean.
yeah, it's very, very different. And so this current organization is around 830 people. And I just manage the North American side of the content strategy. But the interesting thing about the way it's structured is that we have a single website that services all of our global, like our regional offices. And so when you're looking at from an SEO perspective, how am I going to really drive results across the entire site, but specifically for my region, means that I have to kind of do a lot of different collaborating across different regions and across the organization in order to push through the ideas that I might have. And so it's actually, it gets more complicated the more people that you have involved. So right now it's interesting because we're working through kind of revamping our publishing process, just because we've identified some issues on the site with like keyword cannibalization and with kind of just certain areas that maybe haven't, it's an old website, like technically, so probably launched about 10 years ago. It's been revamped a few times, but there's tons and tons of content just kind of like all over the place on there. And so one of the first things that I've had to do is from like a content perspective is just understand everything that we have and figure out, does all of this need to exist here? And so then I have to play like a negotiating game with some of the other regions and with some of the other authors to say, hey, like this content needs to be updated or this content needs to be redirected. And so we have to kind of navigate and collaborate a lot, which means that it takes a long time to get things done. But I do think that having the skills around, influencing and,
Yeah.
making sure that you can get alignment from people and making sure that they feel heard, I think is really important when you want to try to get something done that is not going to be easy.
Yeah, that's great. How many regions do you have at MoEngage?
I'd say it's like probably 7.
And they're all in English?
No, they're not.
Are
So
there is yours the only one that's in English?
no. So we have LATAM. So there's a Brazilian market. I think we have Brazilian content. But everything is all on the same website.
Yeah, that's pretty wild because if you want to push it in, like anything that any other region does is also going to affect your work.
Correct. Yeah. And I don't think that this was the mindset prior to me joining. So my role was essentially created. We didn't have, there was no person like me really at the company before, especially not for North America. So yeah, it's been interesting because basically there was no role like this. And then I come in here and I have all these ideas and things that, I'm being tasked with doing. And so I've spent the last year really just building relationships internally, and, doing my best to, make people understand the things that I think we need to do in order to achieve the results
Mhm.
that I'm being put towards.
What is your trick or the way that you present? I mean, is it like practically speaking, like you put together some data and do a deck to region number 2 and region number 3, or you have a coffee with each individual I guess you guys are remote, but what's how do you go about it?
So it kind of starts small. So so like the most important thing is that a lot of the resources that I work with are still based in India or overseas. And so I have to, kind of come in out of nowhere and then make, not friendships, but like alignments and, alliances with the people who are going to be directly working with me to produce the content that we need to bring to market. And so I have to build a lot of rapport with the people I work with directly. And so that, that takes time. And there's been some like PTSD, I think, from other people who have maybe been on my team before. And so, I came into kind of a difficult situation, but basically it's kind of been a lot of like relationship building. And so we do
Yeah.
regular meetings. And then after I was able to kind of get on the same page with the US support team, I started meeting more regularly with other regional heads. So, like for our EU team, I meet with the person who runs most of their content and product marketing about once or twice a month. And we kind of talk through our projects. And now I'm getting a little bit more visibility into like more of the global content team and the people who are executing content there. And so it's kind of been like let's start small and kind of like work our way into this more integrated approach.
Yeah, that's really powerful and really smart to build those relationships because at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't really matter how good your ideas are because you're going to have to get them bought in to be
Yeah.
able to execute.
And it's not even necessarily about getting buy-in. Like I have authority to do things. It's more about doing it in a way that isn't going to like ruffle too many feathers and,
Yeah.
make sure that people are kind of on your side when you do go ahead and make those decisions.
Yeah. So it sounds like the biggest challenge for you is all of the different regions all working together. What about the executives?
Yeah, from an executive level, I feel like, I mean, yeah, there's definitely work that has to be done to get buy-in for certain projects like this, updated publishing process. I had to kind of, go through and like present the data, upwards too, not just downwards, but upwards towards like my boss and then my boss's boss. And then my boss's boss has to report that out to, his leadership. And so basically it kind of starts with, preparing like all of the data, doing all the analysis and saying, here's the recommendations that I have. And, prepping each person ahead of you in order to kind of bring it up the line.
So you have to prep. So you create the data and then you prep like your boss. This is how you should pitch it. And then they say they're going to pass it on. You also prep that person.
So yeah, currently it's a little bit complicated just because my manager is out on pat leave right now. And so I'm reporting into my boss's boss. So I'm getting a lot more visibility at that level for this particular project. But it's something like what happened is, I have this information. I have data that, certain things we need to change in order to help us reach the goals that we have for our SEO. And so I present that to my boss. My boss takes that to his boss. And then any questions that he thinks that he's going to get from his leadership, he's kind of pushed back down towards me to help
Yeah.
kind of provide more context or, reason why we need to invest. Because part of it is that, sometimes when things aren't exactly working the way that you want, you have to invest more in them. And so I think that's always a challenging conversation to have. But so the best way I've found to navigate that is to just have as much data as you can
Yeah.
in order to kind of help bolster those conversations and getting those people aligned with you and what you need. And so that way they feel supported when they have to go and pitch it.
Yeah. When so you've been doing this process for a while now. Now that you've been pitching and then they probably give you feedback, like you just said, they're gonna ask me this question, so I need this. Now, probably going into it, I imagine you're like, he's gonna say that they're gonna say this, so I'm already gonna put this in. Like, what kind of, can you share any lessons that now you're like, okay, I got to remember to do this and I got to remember to include that?
I think I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like always the standard stuff. Like, why are we investing in this? What do we think that it's going to get
Yeah.
us? Kind of like refocusing around the like end goal and the fact that like this is a long-term strategic initiative to basically take an entire company's process and change it as one person. And I personally don't manage anybody at my company. So we have a central team that has their own content team. And so basically, it's kind of like coming in and saying, hey, like we see that this is inefficient, like we need to change it. So first have to get the buy-in for the idea itself. And then, the feedback is, okay, well, how do you propose we change it? Now it's like, okay, I have to come back with a plan and it has to be, it has to make sense in terms of what the strategy is and how we go about that so that
Mhm.
they can roll it out across their teams. And so it's kind of like this multi-pronged process that there has to be alignment at the top as well as at the bottom.
Yeah. And so when you roll out that kind of plan, are you doing everything? Or I mean, like instructions of this is how you roll it out. This is all the team members.
Yeah, so I'm doing so yeah, it's kind of like I've created an entire framework, right? So that was the first step was okay, here's the framework, here's what we need to be doing. And so we had, a meeting to go over the framework and then for people to kind of digest it. And this is on like the content side, the execution side, not necessarily the leadership side. And leadership doesn't really care about what the actual framework looks like. They care more about the results. So for the framework side of things, then it was kind of a give and take conversation with people inside the organization who are publishing who have questions. And so then I go back and, answer all of the questions that they have and then create a more tailored kind of checklist for them to use during publishing and then hosting trainings for each step of that checklist just to make sure that everybody has what they need in order to execute it.
Not everybody is takes that kind of initiative to roll this out. So I'm going to do this checklist. I'm going to buy in the stakeholders. I'm going to do trainings. And you're doing this because you're going to succeed in your role the best and you're going to achieve your goals doing this. But when did you start rolling out this kind of plan to make change? Because this is not only process change, but also behavior change. And I've come to realize that it's not the thing that most people, like a lot of people aren't going to think to do that. They're going to say, oh, I'm just going to give an idea. And then, I don't know, ops is going to have to roll it out or something. So is that something that you learned in a past role, or you've just decided to take this kind of initiative?
I think that's just something that I do. It's part of just kind of the way that I work. And I feel like I also have a really strong background in project management. And I think that that's part of what helps me be able to do this. And I know that it's going to be it's going to be a difficult thing. Like I started talking about this. So I joined MoEngage probably in November of last year. And I started, kind of talking about the idea that we might need to change some things, especially about the website. And this is after investing in SEO for probably about 6 months. And so once we're not seeing the results that we want to see from the channel, I think the thing is that I want to be proactive, right?
Yeah.
Because in your role, like, you are accountable. And so if you can get ahead of it and make sure that, you're showing the initiative that you're doing the best that you can to get ahead of any results that people might not like. I think that that's probably what kind of fueled this idea that we have a bigger challenge that we need to address. And so I started kind of like working with the agency that I work with on some of our auditing and SEO stuff and preparing kind of talking points around what the issues might be, and then kind of socializing those with my marketing, my boss. And then once he kind of is bought into the idea that this is something that we need to push for, then he's able to kind of go and get his boss involved. And then once that's happened, then it's kind of clear, okay, who needs to be involved in this project? What are we going to need in order to execute it? And that's kind of how this got started. So I would say we've been working on it probably since, I want to say, April.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Like, is this something that have you finished it, or it's ongoing?
It's ongoing, and I imagine that it will be ongoing for quite some time.
Yeah. So like overhaul of your processes.
Yeah. Mostly around, content production and just digital publishing in general. And obviously there's like technical SEO side of things, which I'm not able to update those things myself. So I work with a web ops team.
Yeah.
And so getting them kind of bought into what needs to happen there, and figuring out, they have a lot of other priorities too, other than just this SEO thing that Shana's working on. So that's just like another side of it that we're trying to, build the relationship over with the web ops and make sure that they feel confident that this is something that is important. And
Yeah.
then kind of getting like getting my leadership to kind of, because I don't manage the web ops team, right? So I have to kind of influence my leadership to kind of tell them that this is an important project that they need to prioritize.
Right. So that's a whole other thing, is getting web ops, especially is the web ops team, are they also working on the product?
Yeah. Actually, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we just manage the website, and it's a very small team.
Yeah, but they have a bunch of other priorities. So when, like you said, Shana, the one person team, is coming and saying, "Hey, can you do this thing for me?" That must be hard to get them to do it without having built those relationships and showing them that what they're doing is gonna, like, do you have to connect? Is it, please do it for me, also I got your boss buy-in? Or are you somehow connecting it to, please do this, also here's how it might help your KPIs?
Yeah, it's kind of more like, here's what needs to happen. I have like your leadership in my corner for this. And so I kind of if I'm getting pushback from somebody, then usually I will involve my own leadership to
Yeah.
influence them to say like, this is a priority because it's a serious business case, right? It doesn't just impact me or any one team. Like it's an entire thing that if we can get it to work, then all of our KPIs will be better.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And in terms of like short term and long term, I mean, you were hired to do organic growth and SEO, which you'd think most leaders know it's a long term play, but are you getting any kind of pressure for more short term returns since you've joined?
So in this current role, no, which I'm actually very surprised about that because the previous role that I had was very different culturally. I feel like at least at MoEngage, they've been around, like the company has been around for over a decade now. And so I think that they have their fair share of like understanding like what needs to happen in order to get the results. Um, like of course we all want like big short-term wins. So I do think that it's important to continue at least
Mhm.
like showing the things that we're working on and the wins that we are achieving. But I haven't gotten a ton of pressure yet to to execute on just short-term strategy. And so I think that shows like a level of maturity that I
Yeah.
at least didn't experience in the startup that I worked in, which had very little understanding of marketing in general.
That's a tough environment to be in. And you probably did the right move changing. A lot of these conversations that I've been having, leaders say when I couldn't really get anything done, or, they're just short sighted or immature in their marketing knowledge, there actually was, at the end of the day, not very much of a way to get buy-in, and what you had to do was change jobs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it happens, and I feel like it happens a lot. And I see this kind of chatter on LinkedIn a lot too, where it's like if you can't, if like the marketing leader doesn't have autonomy and decision making power, and if it's all just like, oh, well, the CEO doesn't want this or the CFO
Yeah.
doesn't want this, then you're really just like handicapping the marketing team, and it makes it really challenging to get anything done. So like marketing has to have a seat at the table, I think, for marketing programs to actually be executed
Yeah.
successfully.
Well, this feels like a really good place to wrap this up, Shana. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and experience and insights with me.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you having me on.
Totally. And I will be leaving your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Is there anywhere else you would like for me to direct people to?
Um, I guess if they're interested in reading about customer engagement, then you can go to the MoEngage website.
All right. I will also drop that in the show notes. For those listening and watching, thank you for spending your time here today. I hope you found this conversation as insightful as I did, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks.